They're just action games with really good combat. Action games with really good combat.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I'm gonna have to make some kind of response to this, aren't I? I already did like 3 consecutive videos about these kind of games, but I'm gonna have to do this. Apparently, I'm just turning into a character action channel now. Is this what they mean when they say hell of my own making? Anyway, for quite a while now, I've been seeing a growing confusion on what someone means when they say character action game. Stylish action, crazy games, spectacle fighters, Devil May Cry likes, Kamiya simulators. Call it whatever you want. I'm most familiar with character action, but I do like the sound of stylish action. There's never been a hard written definition of what it is due to how niche those games tend to be. But now that we have Devil May Cry 5 and Bayonetta 3 coming out in the future, and that hopefully means more AAA and indie games like them will follow, I think it's about time we finally address this. And I'm just going to put this out there now, this isn't a call out video on Mr. Gaming Brent. I actually agree with the core idea of what his video said about how character action isn't a properly defined thing. Because for the longest time, fans of this subgenre have based if a game is character action or not almost entirely on a couple of key elements, and if it feels like one, which is part of the reason why we've never gotten a clear definition on it. When someone would ask if something like God of War fitted into the genre, some would say yes, some would say no, and some would give a non-committal, kind of? This vagueness for how we classify them has inevitably led some to go in the opposite direction of this type of classification, believing we should just call them action games, pure and simple, since they don't have enough at face value that separates them from other action games beyond the combat. But that is equally reductionist because that makes it harder to talk about and discuss these games within their own subgenre, and disregards the unique design elements of them. I know that some don't agree with terms like character action or stylish action, since that can be somewhat vague on what that might mean at face value, but dismissing the term that people have been using and acting like that omits the entire concept of how we classify things like a genre is arbitrary in of itself. For example, if I was someone who liked classic Resident Evil and was looking for more horror games similar to that, and I got back Fear and Until Dawn, I might be a bit confused. Yeah, those are great horror games in their own right, but I want something like Resident Evil, with things like inventory management and a de-emphasis on combat, which is why we call those games survival horror. All horror games have a focus on surviving, sure, but games like RE and Silent Hill focus on being resourceful in order to survive through hordes of zombies rather than actively fighting against them. Hence the name and the reason why they exist as their own subgenre. On top of this, if I critiqued Until Dawn for not having the same type of combat and resource management like RE, that would be a bit inconsistent, since they're approaching horror in entirely different ways and have completely different intentions on what it wants the player to feel when playing the game. This doesn't mean we can't critique both from the same baseline of how effective they are as horror games, but expecting them to approach them from the exact same way makes it harder for games to innovate on what they are doing. We should be judging things for what they are, not what they're not. In that same way, stylish character action games aren't an end-all be-all genre that supersedes any other genre it's associated with, but merely as a way to specify what type of game we're dealing with within a much larger spectrum. Dark Souls, Arkham Asylum, Dynasty Warriors, Kingdom Hearts, and Devil May Cry all technically fit within the extremely broad definition of action games, but have incredibly different playstyles and intentions with their game design and narratives. So we divide them up into their own little subcategories based on their own individual qualities so as to better talk about and critique them. And that now finally brings me to the all-important question of, what makes a character action game then? Actually, let me rephrase that. What makes a good character action game? Well, to start, the thing most people agree on at this point is that character action type of games have deep combat. Titles like Devil May Cry and Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance are often known most for their core gameplay being built around unparalleled combat depth. A number of unique techniques, free-flowing combos, aerial combat, launchers, jump cancels, parrying, dodge rolls, enemy jumps, time slowdown, helm splitters, super forms, special execution attack, different weapons. The list goes on depending on how crazy you want to go into these games. For some playing character action games, it might just be your usual mash the buttons to kill things title.
If you just continue to press the same button like X, 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 and Y, 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 and X, X, and Y, Y, Y again, you'll be sucked.
But for those that like going through them with a fine-tooth comb, there's a lot more to find and experiment with. These games are designed to make you feel cool in combat and give you as many tools as possible for this. This ability to execute whatever combos your little mind can come up with is one of the reasons why these games have developed a more hardcore fan base online, like those that love doing combo videos to show the cool stuff they can pull off. Because beyond just having fun ways to fight enemies, it really incentivizes creativity in combat. But deep combat does not a stylish character action game make, which segues into the next thing that defines them: systems that emphasize style and perfection.
Maybe if you're truly cool, you don't need to be told you're cool.
I'm sure you do. How else would you know?
For character action games, playing stylishly is effectively their thesis statement. So they almost universally incorporate systems that incentivize using all the mechanics at your disposal in order to be as stylish as possible. Some games, even if they have good combat depth, don't have anything in place that makes you want to use everything in the tech list it pops in front of you, especially if you found the one or two things that are super effective. Which is why games like Bayonetta and Wonderful 101 have things like a style grading system that rewards you for playing stylishly and using different weapons and combos. Now, other games may have things that give you scores and grade you for how well you did, in order to maybe give you some extra incentive to replay them to get better scores, but the stylish action systems that I'm talking about actively rewards you for how well you're playing, typically by giving you more currency to get more skills to add to your combat repertoire. Not unsimilar to grandparents that gives you cash payouts or rewards for better grades in school, thus giving you extra reasons for studying to do better beyond, needing to graduate. Some of these games even have systems in place where you have to meet a certain style threshold before you can do damage to enemies or use certain mechanics, meaning playing in a repetitive, dull manner can be detrimental to you moving forward in them and make for a lesser experience. On top of this, stylish action games also tend to dock marks for being hit, dying, or using items for health. This is because, nothing is cool about being killed a bunch of times, and being stylish and efficient is the main design themes for titles like Devil May Cry. Being able to get through without needing any help is a lot more cool than requiring assistance from the game, which is why character action titles also have a tendency to be a tiny bit harder than your average action game, so as to push you into getting better and learning to play as best you can in order to face down this difficulty, aka getting good. This style of game wants you to feel cool while playing, and avoiding being hit or dying is a part of that, though some can take it a bit too far. By making things more challenging, it pushes you into thinking outside the box in how to handle things, which can open up more possibilities in how to handle combat. I think this is why I never had much issue with the difficulty in Souls games, since I was raised on stuff like Devil May Cry and God Hand, which are equally challenging, if not more so. The thing that tends to get me killed in Souls games is usually my own impatience, since I'm used to doing things at a quicker pace, which is the third major aspect of stylish action games. Another thing that isn't cool is being slow, and I mean playing slowly, which is why stylish character action games have an emphasis on movement and a faster momentum than other hack and slash beat 'em up kind of games. This may seem like a minor point, but one thing I've noticed of all the games I've looked at are that they move at a faster pace than other 3D action games, either in their combat or just in their movement, like having dashing mechanics or ways that make it easier to close the gap between enemies. With this desire to go fast, the systems are expecting you to keep up with that pace, adding in things like having a ticking clock to keep up your style gauge, or rewards based on your clear time, meaning that not only is the game's combat fast-paced, but the game design is constantly holding up a stopwatch to check how fast you're going. You can play them at a slower pace, but personally, beyond the lower grades, it doesn't even feel like you're playing these games correctly when you do this. Games of this ilk want you darting around levels, beating down everything in your wake before the enemies can even react properly, either keeping them up in the air with constant combos and juggling maneuvers, or using the tight level design to your advantage. And that brings me to the last thing that I think is a core design aspect of character action games, and that is their level design. The main inspiration for this type of 3D beat 'em up was Devil May Cry's original creator Hideki Kamiya's love of classic arcade beat 'em up games, going through the game sections one at a time in order to style on foes that he would run into, which is one of the reasons that DMC1 has a much more sectioned off, narrow level design, so that it can highlight the melee combat, which would lead into a recurring element in all the character action titles that would follow. Often with these games, you're locked in a room with a group of enemies to fight and can't move on until you prove yourself and defeat them. The truth is though, you aren't locked in with them, they're locked in with you. In other hack and slash beat 'em up titles like the Muso games, or just action games in general, you can typically just push on through if you don't really want to deal with enemies at the time, either because you want to continue or you're low on health. But with stylish action, you have to fight everything that's being presented to you in each section. The focus is on how good you are at the combat, and you have to prove that you're able to handle it if you want to continue on through the rest of the game. Again, the design thesis for these games is to be stylish and effective, and being able to handle everything the game is going to throw at you is a part of that. Now I'm sure there'll be some people saying, but this Sonic game has a fast pace and a ranking system, Metal Gear Solid lets you play stylishly, Shovel Knight has section-based level design that emphasizes challenging the player. Are all of these character action games? Well, just like how a rock band, metal band, and country band can all use the same instruments but are greatly different in what they play, it's pretty much the same thing with how we classify stylish character action or any other game genre, where the core elements aren't as important as how they play off each other. The style systems feed into the combat, the faster pace feeds into the style systems, the level design feeds into the faster pace, the combat, you get the picture. None of these aspects are as strong on their own. They're a Voltron of game design elements where they're all made stronger by the presence of the other, and taken alone, there isn't much to them. All of these design elements are feeding into the main focus of these games, playing stylishly. So does this mean that DMC Devil May Cry or DMC2 count as a character action game then, even if they drop the ball a bit with some of these design elements? Yes, they're not exceptionally great ones, but they do fit within that genre. Just like games like Ninja Gaiden, God Hand, Bayonetta, Wonderful 101, Metal Gear Rising, Ghost Rider, Chaos Legion, Nello, Assault Spy, Legend of Korra, and Transformers Devastation all fit into this genre to varying degrees of quality. You could even fit Beautiful Joe and Aces Wild under this classification in a broader sense, since the only thing that separates them from the rest is their lack of a third dimension. Now, does something like Nier Automata count in the stylish character action genre, since it is an open world RPG, but does share some of the similarities in regards to combat design?
Well, there's actually an interesting discussion to be had here about the community and culture of a genre. You see...
Ryan, why are you interrupting me?
Oh, I'm talking about how subgenres tend to be more defined by the culture around them rather than the contents of the artwork itself.
Okay, that's nice, but I'm specifically talking about genre and how we define them. Why don't you do that on your channel?
Oh, you mean Codex Entry on YouTube.com? Or you can also find me on my Twitter handle at Codex Entry.
Okay, enough of this shilling. Get out of here.
Fine. See you when you're done here, provided I don't screw up and fail to get the video out on time, because that is a distinct possibility. Peace.
Stupid YouTube collaboration clause.
Someone didn't read the contract.
Anyways, as I was saying, here's the dirty little secret about genres and subgenres. They aren't this strict cookie-cutter concept that never changes or can't mix with others. Genres naturally, over the course of time, evolve and develop as different people work within it and how audiences interact with them. When Westerns first became a genre, it was based on films that were primarily cowboy movies set in the late 19th century in the American Old West. But as it went on, that evolved and got nicher things such as post-World War II revisionist westerns like Soldier Blue that were designed to subvert the classic western narrative in order to critique it, or neo-westerns like Dirty Harry, No Country for Old Men, and even Logan, that use common western themes but have a more contemporary setting and feel to it. Similarly, 2D beat-em-ups started with single-player arcade games like Kunio-kun, and then evolved into multiplayer games like Double Dragon or Alien vs. Predator, and then evolved to 3D beat-em-ups and eventually into more diverse subgenres like character action, that emphasize the player's skills and abilities at the game through stylish combat systems. Now, one or two games doesn't make an entirely new subgenre, but when you can make a decent-sized listing of them, all with similar design elements, I think we're at the point that this is a thing we can call a subgenre to itself. The problem arises when people try to make it into an exclusive thing that can't change or blend with other game elements. The more we try to hard define something and say X can't be this because it has Y, the harder it is for it to innovate and evolve. It's a good thing to have a definition to describe it so we can identify it when we see it, but acting like it can't change or that it's too nebulous to define so it can't possibly be something worth acknowledging is a good way to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, especially in a more critical sense. And yes, I did just spend the last 15 minutes or so defining what character action is, but that's just the definition of how I see it existing now and the base elements of it. But as we have game developers experimenting with that style of game and design, whether that's incorporating more RPG elements into it, or adding in more multiplayer elements that increase the possibility for inventive combos, or whatever they come up with, that definition may change and grow. You look at something like Nello, a game where you're an alien dashing around at high speeds, firing at other aliens, almost like a 3D shoot 'em up, and it looks nothing like Devil May Cry. But when you get into it, it 100% is comparable to all these other games. The Steam page for it even classifies it as character action. The same goes for other indie games like Assault Spy or Fairy Bloom Frisia. They're taking the concept of what character action is and trying to expand on it in different ways, either through different settings or design choices. The more we try to exclude games from a subgenre for extremely pedantic reasons like they don't feel like it, or because of some perceived level of quality, or because you don't like the term people use for it, the more difficult we're making for it to evolve and grow. And if that happens, then it's doomed to forever be this obscure thing that never really picks up. And as a fan of character action, or whatever you wish to call these games, I personally would hate to see that. Anyway, thanks for watching. A special shout out to Ryan for helping with the writing on this video. Make sure to go check out his channel, I'm sure he has a similar type of video brewing. Like I said at the end of my last video, I'm going to be in Japan for the rest of the month, and if I know myself as well as I think I do, I'm likely uploading this right before I head out to the plane. So there won't be a lot going on with the channel until about August. But I do have something interesting planned for when I get back. So with that said, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.